Well, thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for joining us for our first webinar Wednesday of 2025. Today's topic is going to be how to turn wellness goals into daily habits. And this webinar series is brought to you by Can Do MS. My name is Krista Sipp, Director of Programs here at Can Do MS, and I will be your moderator this evening. I want to take a brief moment to thank our generous sponsor for supporting this year's webinar series. Thank you to EMD Serono. And now I'm very excited to introduce our speaker this evening. So welcome, Dr. Amy Behimer. I am so excited for you to share your story and knowledge with us tonight. Amy's going to give us some information on herself, so I'm going to go ahead and hand off things to her now. And have a great webinar, everyone. Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you so much, Krista. And I really thank you, everybody, for having me for the first webinar of the new year. I have so much gratitude for Can Do MS and all the work that they do, not only for me living with MS like you all, but also getting to coach and work with people with MS in this way. So thank you so much to Can Do. So I just want to give a high-level overview of what we are going to cover in this next hour, which I think is going to fly by. I'm going to introduce myself, like Krista said, so that we can really start to get to know each other. I'm hoping to build some trust and some credibility with you, because when we trust, we actually learn better. And then I'm going to teach you a little bit about habits. That's what you came here for. And I'm going to invite you to take a little guided action. And we are going to wrap up with getting your questions answered. So before we dive in, take a minute, pause, and think about your big wellness goal. And I would love if you're willing to share it in the chat so that others can see. We may start to see some themes. What's the one thing that you would love to change about your health? Why are you here tonight is another way to get to the answer, possibly. Maybe the quiz that was sent out that you took earlier highlighted an area that you would like to improve. Or maybe it's something that you've been saying for years. I wish I could just, what is that? I see avoid diabetes. Yes, less fatigue, quit smoking, lose weight. You guys are putting them in faster than I can say it, and I love it. Prioritize relationship. I love that. I wish I could run again, remain active, eat healthy, exercise daily. Yeah, the common ones that I hear from clients are, I want to feel healthier, plain and simple. I want to have more energy. I want to eat better, move more, stress less, connect deeper, and really be up for some challenges. So ditch the walker, improve nutrition, fitness, weight. I love these. You guys are in the perfect place, because we are going to be talking about a skill today that helps us get to all these things. So first, we're gonna start. We have that big picture goal in mind. Some of you listed pretty lofty goals that you've likely had for a long time. Let's do a poll on a scale of 1 to 10. Now that you have this big picture goal in mind, how confident are you that you can make that happen? 1 on this scale is going to be no, not going to happen. Kind of think of I've tried and it just we don't have a ton of confidence that it's going to happen. 5 means maybe, and 10 means it's as good as done. And if you could answer it in the poll, that would be amazing. We'll see what we get. If this has been your goal a while you're answering this, I want to just normalize that it's normal to have doubts. These goals that we have, they are simple often, but that doesn't mean that they're always easy. And so be honest and be kind to yourself as you answer. And we're going to revisit this at the end of the session to see how we did, to see if we are able to boost our confidence in this area just a bit. And if you just put it in the chat, we can see what our results are. Okay, so our highest amount in the chats, it looks like it was about 5. Okay, maybe. I like this. All right, we're gonna come back to this. So Atomic Habits is a book that you may have heard of. It has been on the New York Times best-selling list for 260 weeks. That is 5 years straight. What that tells me is that people clearly know that habits matter. So many of you, if you're like me and you're like the people that I work with, have this book on their shelf, and maybe you've even read it a time or two. In it, James Clear says this. He says, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your habits, plain and simple. And the same really is true for our health. The quality of our health is determined by the quality of our habits. That's why these things matter. We know that when our health feels hard, that life can feel harder too. So we know that these things aren't easy, but we're here after today, hopefully to help navigate our health with more ease. And we're going to use habits to do it. So who am I? Can Do asked me here to share this webinar because of my unique perspective, I think, through these three lenses. As a coach, I work with people who want to live their healthiest, fullest lives, MS and all. I have a group program called The Club. I do one-on-one coaching and also have a podcast, The Habit Hub for Autoimmune Health. I'm also a pharmacist. So with almost 20 years as a doctor of pharmacy, I have a deep understanding of the human body, what's happening when disease shows up, and more importantly, the research behind how we can create autoimmune health to get back on track. And also as someone who lives with MS, I was diagnosed in 2012, and I've spent the last 13 years gathering personal data on what works. I live with a primary progressive type, and I practice what I preach every day. So everything I'm sharing here and asking you to do, I promise I'm doing right along with you. So I'm going to briefly share my MS story. And as I do, I really want you to think about your own MS story, because how we tell our story really matters. So mine began as a child of the 80s in a loving home with a hardworking single mom. Health really was not a huge focus. Sports kept me active, but my diet really leaned heavily on convenience foods. In high school, white patches started appearing on my skin. This is in the early 2000s. And that's when I first learned what autoimmunity was. By pharmacy school, I understood that the clustering of autoimmune diseases, I learned that if you have one, then you're likely going to have more. And so I remember thinking, oh gosh, I hope that this is my only one. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. In 2010, I was diagnosed with Graves' disease, an autoimmune condition of the thyroid. And my eye was actually popping out of my head is the way that I was able to know that it was happening. I was concerned, but I wasn't concerned enough to change my lifestyle or my habits. So a pill got that into remission, and I carried on. Again, I wasn't unhealthy. I wouldn't have called myself that, but I certainly wasn't prioritizing my health. So a lot of you may be able to relate to having more than one diagnosis that you're dealing with. So around 2011, I just started feeling off, not right. This face in the picture says it all. Something was brewing, but it wasn't until 2012 when a pesky foot drop that I had been ignoring for quite some time, I proactively went to seek some answers. The diagnosis was MS. So at 27, I don't know if you can relate, it rocked my world. I felt devastated. I felt afraid. I felt downright sad, and I couldn't shake what I'd learned in pharmacy school. MS is described as progressive, chronic, neurodegenerative disease. So I stayed in that dark place for a couple years, but thankfully I heard the right message at the right time. That's when I dove headfirst into functional medicine, lifestyle changes, and habits, really focusing on everything I could to control everything that I could control about my health and my MS. Now, don't let this picture fool you. As we all know, living with MS, it's not all balloons and sunshine. We're human, we have ups, we have downs, and we can create more ups. And that's what I'm here living and hoping to teach through habits. Or we simply get to learn how to pause, recognize the ups, and appreciate them when they are here. So just a couple more minutes to get to know each other before we dive into habits and goals. These people, my family, they're my big why. If we were one-on-one, I would be asking you about your why. Because when it comes to wellness goals and habits, knowing yourself, knowing your story, knowing your desires, they really matter. They're going to make a difference when we talk about motivation. So I'm going to share mine first here, but I'm really inviting you to reflect on yours as we get started. Again, family, independence. I already have seen that in the chat coming through as a common why that people have. feeling moments of healthy, happy, at peace, in control. And really, my favorite feeling is feeling proud. Couple things that you should know is I'm obsessed with habits, which you're about to find out. Can't live without crunchy foods. My mission is to be healthier after MS than before, and my superpower is helping others do the same. So back to the chat. What is your superpower? If it's hard to pinpoint, what would your best friend or your mom tell me if I asked you what your superpower was? We are starting on a high note for a very, very good reason. Everything I share about habits and how we change, it is grounded in research, and it is shown that tapping into our strengths like this helps open up your brain and helps you learn and problem solve more effectively. Ooh, I will not give up. Positivity, action. I love this. Change, teaching, learning, resilience, positivity, helping others, empathy. I love that. So you are actually turning on your brain so that from here on out in the rest of the webinar, you are going to learn more, retain more, and really be able to problem solve in a better way because we're tapping into this strength. I love this equation and I use it often. You'll see it again. Learning plus action equals change. And this is one of the actions that I'm inviting you to take now. Giver, exploring, creativity. Well, I could just keep reading those, but we're gonna keep going. So today's takeaway for me today is going to be a success if you leave here with two things. So be on the lookout for these two things. First is a boost in self-efficacy. And secondly, I would love if you left with clarity on your next step to wellness. So we cannot boil the ocean. Wellness is a big thing that we get to do over a whole lifetime, but we don't need to boil the ocean. We only need to know our next step. So if I'm saying I want you to leave with more self-efficacy, it might be nice if we cover what it is. Self-efficacy is your belief in your ability to create change and achieve your goals. It's like that inner confidence in you, that voice that says, I can do this. It helps you make and break habits. It helps you take control of unhelpful behaviors. So there probably are some unhelpful behaviors that are standing in your way between you and what that big wellness goal was. Self-efficacy can help with that. It helps you stay motivated even when progress feels slow. So questions that were sent in ahead of time, motivation was a theme, and we're going to talk about that. Self-efficacy can look different for everybody. Even different parts of our life, we can have different amounts. So it's not about being perfect. It really is about awareness and strengthening your belief in yourself, one small, tiny habit at a time. How do you know if your self-efficacy needs boosting? So it never hurts to give it a boost. No matter who you are, we all can use what we learned today to boost our self-efficacy. But I wanted to point out a few ways so that you could see how it may be showing up in yourself. A lower self-efficacy can look like avoiding challenges because they seem too hard. Or if you tend to focus more on what's not working than what is possible. Or maybe if there is a setback, or you have a new or a worsening symptom, and it feels like proof that your health is never going to be what you want it to be with MS. Those are signs that our self-efficacy may be low, and that's not a bad thing because there are things we can do to boost it. Now, I am really willing to bet that, make sure I can get my slide, willing to bet that some of you can relate to some of these signs of high self-efficacy. You feel excited and curious to take on new challenges, a new goal, maybe a new program. You feel really committed to that big picture goal and the smaller ones too, because we are going to need both. Even when things get tough, you stay committed. You notice that you bounce back quickly when there's a disappointment, and you really frame challenges as something that you grow through. So many of you may know Dr. Terry Wallace through her work with the National MS Society and her research on how these lifestyle changes can impact MS. So I wanted to share her take on self-efficacy when I was fortunate to have her as a guest on the podcast. She pointed out that this higher self-efficacy lowers inflammation, and improves the function of your immune cells on a biochemical level. So, yes, our thoughts and our beliefs and how we feel about ourselves and the power that we have over our situation, it actually changes our biology, it changes our physiology. So, you're probably wondering where it comes from, this self efficacy. It starts to form in early childhood and it grows or shrinks as we experience life, as we learn new skills, and as we just go about in the world. So you're probably wondering, how can I get more? We talked about all the great benefits of having more self-efficacy. So that's what we're here to do. Simply being here is a step towards boosting the self-efficacy. And by making these 4 habits a part of your life, the first one is to celebrate successes, celebrate more, celebrate the big and the small, the funny and the serious, even things that don't naturally feel like wins. We want to teach our brain that it should go looking for moments that are worth celebrating. The second one has everything to do about connection, being in community with others like you. Again, we're doing it right now. Whether you're introverted or extroverted, humans are wired to belong. And engaging with others when we share in similar joys and struggles and experiences, it's one of the most nourishing habits to boost self-efficacy. Another way we can boost self-efficacy is to cultivate a positive mindset. This isn't about only being positive. It's about balancing these ups and downs that are really natural, not only if we have MS, but also if we are human, if we are living life. And you probably have heard of the negativity bias. It's very real. So we'll intentionally make space to notice and amplify the positive to help overcome that. And gaining awareness of what's beneath your actions, your thoughts, your emotions, that is understanding the why behind your behavior. It is such a key to lasting behavior change. So we're going to revisit these 4 self-efficacy boosters throughout our time together, and I'm going to highlight how to make them a part of your daily habits. So let's talk about the current reality. Research shows that 80% of people abandon their New Year's resolutions by February. So we're in January right now. And it's often because they lack a clear plan for change. Even if you didn't set a New Year's resolution per se, think back to that wellness goal that you put in the chat when we first started. That is what I call your MS resolution or your autoimmune health resolution. At the start of the year, over 70% of people want to eat healthier. Over 60% of people want to move more or move better. But guess how many people set a resolution to learn a new skill? I'm going to give you the answer. It's less than 20%. So here's the good news. Habit change is a skill that we can learn. Anybody can learn it. You can learn it. There's no endless motivation necessary. There's no iron willpower required. And once you have this skill, those other goals like eating better, moving more, they become much easier to achieve. So if you focus on learning the skill of building habits that feel good and you figure out how to make them stick, chances of reaching all these other ones actually go up. So let's dive in to the magical world of habits, because that is what we're here to do. Now, this is where, I geek out, but we had habits in the title, so we knew what we were getting. First, what are habits? We're going to answer the what, the why, and the how. What is a habit? The dictionary definition is a usual way of behaving. And research shows that it makes up to 50% of our day. So no wonder the quality of these habits actually matter quite a bit. Besides being a universal language that we have all heard of, I'm going to run through my top reasons why habits are made for us living with MS, why they matter. It kind of answers that question, what's in it for us? So first up is energy. I call fatigue the symptom that binds many of us living with autoimmunity. Our habits can not only conserve energy, but also create it. When we are in the grip of a habit, your brain actually gets to power down and save energy from having to make a million decisions because it gets to run on autopilot. It gets to run on habit. So if half of our days are being run by our habits, The real win-win is when we can make more habits, the ones that help us gain energy, and break more of the ones that can drain it. All right, I have another why. Healthier habits not only help us function better, but they also can help us feel better. This is backed by high-quality science showing how lifestyle habits benefit our bodies. You guys, if you are attending talks, if you're on social media, if you read the news, we know that there is good quality science that these simple habits do matter. There's also really solid research behind habit change itself and that skill. So again, it's a skill we can learn and apply over and over again. And the studies help us feel confident that this stuff actually works. It's the pharmacist in me. I love those studies. Another reason I love it, they're available to everyone today. Everyone, all of us. There's not a single person on this call, on this webinar, that some form of healthier, energizing lifestyle habits are not available to. So it is accessible. You've likely heard the proverb, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So my spin is the best time to start a healthier habit, it was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. There's a lot of things that will try to tell us, our brain will try to tell us that today's not the day or I'll do it later. But honestly, today is the day. All right, we're on to another why. Habits can save us a lot. They can save us time. We already talked about the energy that they save, and they can save us money. Plus, most are free. So I saw this last year at my chiropractor's office. It was in this pretty sign, and it just really stuck with me. Remaining unhealthy is an expense. Getting healthy is an investment. Staying healthy is a savings. And when we're talking about health, we're not talking about just physical health. That's part of it. But we have got to bring in our emotional health, bring in our mental health, which is very real for us with MS. And the investment that this is what I'm assuming, this quote and this sign that I saw, when I see investment, I think of the precious things that we do invest. We invest our time, we invest our energy, and we invest our attention in addition to money. So all of these things are precious. You are investing your energy, your time, and attention right now to being here with me, with Can Do MS, with each other. And that is something to be celebrated. Back to our habit. Celebrate yourself for that. All right, we're still going on whys. Another why, habits help us more easily track progress, which our brains love and need. So habits can be the tiniest actions that add up and over time help us reach that bigger wellness goal. And the last why in my campaign for habits, I saved this best one for last. Lifestyle habits are not about treating the symptoms. They do, and I call that a bonus benefit, getting to actually feel better, especially the way that we are going to do habits. But they really do go to the root of what makes our cells healthier, which make up our tissues, which make up our organs, which make up this nervous system of ours, and ultimately our entire brains and bodies. So using them really is a root cause approach. So this is a good time to highlight an important truth. Our lifestyle habits are just one part of the autoimmune or the MS equation. Welcome to your Epigenetics 101. We have two key factors. We have our genes and we have our environment. So yes, MS comes with this genetic predisposition, but environmental factors, some estimate 70 to 90% of that equation, those environmental factors do play a role. Lifestyle habits impact not only the initiation of MS, so whether or not we get a diagnosis, but can also affect the progression. So no matter what chapter you are in your MS story, everybody here, your habits matter, our habits matter. And here's the best part. Here's the part that you can control. How we think, how we eat, how we move, how we rest, and how we connect. This is the part that we want to focus on. So I feel like everybody uses the analogy of, for autoimmune disease, that genes load the gun and environment pulls the trigger. I'd like to offer a different one today, one that actually gives some of our power back. Think of your genes as the keys on a piano. The tempo, the pace, the combinations that we use, that determines the music that comes out. The number of keys on the piano, that's set. There's 88, that's not changing. But again, how we play that piano determines the music that comes out. And in the same way, your lifestyle habits can shape how you feel and how you live with MS. So here is my invitation to you to be abnormal. Why? Because this is what's considered normal. 50% of US adults have a chronic illness. 80% they report that they're mentally or emotionally unwell. Autoimmune disease is on the rise, affecting upwards of 30 million Americans, and MS as well, 2.5 million worldwide. 97.3% of Americans aren't maintaining healthy habits in the 4 key areas of lifestyle habits. 97.3%. And anecdotally, don't you notice how most people, whether they have MS or not, they kind of report that they're tired or unwell, even without a diagnosis. So that is what is normal. There's a book I love. It's called The Healthy Deviant. And the author describes a healthy deviant as someone who willingly defies unhealthy norms for success, to feel better. I call it being an autoimmune health creator, an orange fish, someone who, despite having a disease, takes control of these habits, these things, these lifestyle pieces that we can to help create health. So I want to recognize that being an orange fish can feel hard. It's like swimming upstream at times. But here's the bright side. You can cause a ripple effect. People will start to notice how healthier habits look on you. Your kids, your friends, your coworkers, you'll start attracting more orange fish and inspiring purple fish to turn orange just by being you. I see it all the time with my clients. It's wonderful. You might be wondering how this all fits into your healthcare plan, especially if you're working with a neurologist. The good news is conventional medicine and lifestyle habits, they lift each other up. You don't have to choose one or the other. I call it our DMTs, which are disease modifying therapies, but I like to call them our DMHs. All these things that we are able to do in our lifestyle, and together they truly can create a powerful synergy. And that's me getting my infusion and eating my squash, my favorite vegetable. So we have covered the what and the why of habits. Now the juicy part, and the reason you're here, is the how of habits. I used this hub image a bit earlier when I was talking about genes and lifestyle. So let me formally introduce you to this framework. It's the Habit Hub for Autoimmune Health. And it's also the name of my podcast. And so, no surprise, it encompasses the 6 key areas of lifestyle that we can build to create autoimmune health: mindset, food, movement, rest, connection, and what I like to call good stresses, which are challenges that we take on to grow. And we do not have time today to go into every single one and all the wonder of it, but hopefully if you have a chance to take the quiz, you can dig deeper into a certain area and get excited to learn about all these things over a lifetime, because these things aren't changing. I've yet to have somebody or myself, find a habit that they want to make that doesn't fit into one of these 6 categories. It's a challenge to find that, but it really does encompass all the different areas. And there is a secret sauce to using and living and applying the Habit Hub. And it's made up of 5 ingredients. These are 5 S's. Another not so secret is that I love alliteration. And not only because it's fun, but it's also a proven way, again, to help us learn, remember, and use concepts. So the first S is science. Science-backed, and at the same time, the second S is always going to be self. Habits need to be self-focused. We will use research as a starting point for experimenting, but it's so imperative that we use habits to build self-understanding, self-love, self-trust, and recognize that habits are personal. The third S is strategies, which we're going to cover in a bit, because we need to be able to apply knowledge. All the knowledge in the world doesn't do much if we can't go out and use it in the world. The strategies also are science-backed, so we know that they work. And the next S, my favorite, is simplicity. As humans, our brains love to overcomplicate things. They want us to get confused so that we stay stuck and don't move. This S simplicity reminds us that when in doubt, we go back to the basics, the ABCs, because really 95% of healthier habits are basic. All of those goals that I saw flying into the chat when we talked about wellness can be accomplished with these basic habits. They're common sense a lot of times. We know that, but we also know that common sense does not mean common action. So we're back to our well-being next exit. Think back to your wellness goal. We just discussed how believing in yourself, that self-efficacy, shapes your thoughts and your feelings and your habits. But here's another truth. Obstacles are going to come up. If there weren't obstacles, we wouldn't be here. I would be here presenting on this and nobody would be here, but because they would have had it all figured out. So we know that obstacles are real, and pretending they're not there is the surefire way to let them stop us. So let's name them right now. Let's call out the roadblocks that are going to get in our way. So, top 5 reasons goals fail. It's like knowing the test questions ahead of time. You'd know exactly what to study. So today I'm going to give you both the questions and the answers. We're going to cover the top 5 research-backed reasons that habits don't stick, or why we just don't reach those goals. And these are all backed by research. As we go through these, I really want you to think about which reason may have gotten in your way with this goal before. And if this is your first time setting this goal, make your best guess. Which one of these reasons do you think is likely to get in the way? And that clarity that I hope you leave with today could come from focusing on just one of these goals and using it as your next step. Again, we will have the recording. We can come back to this, but I want you to be listening out for the one that you feel like you could take from today and take action on. So we are not taught this stuff, how humans change in a way that does not feel like deprivation. If we don't use these top 5 reasons, what happens is that we start to feel like we failed, and that hijacks our brain, and it jumpstarts this vicious cycle that feeds that low self-efficacy. So BJ Fogg, he's a researcher and an author out of Harvard, or he's out of Stanford, and he speaks so much truth. He wrote, "We are not the problem. Our approach to change is. It's a design flaw, not a personal flaw." So everybody gets to give themselves a little self-love. It's not our fault. Again, we're not taught this stuff. And until now we have some tools to actually go about it. Let's show ourselves some compassion and ask more from ourselves once we learn a new way of doing things, which we're about to do. Again, with the strategies, before we dive in, I'm going to introduce you to another framework and tool that I have in my tool belt. It's the ABC Habit Playbook. There is so much research out there, countless books, endless strategies on habits. And in my world, I like to call them plays from this strategy playbook. And they're part of the secret sauce, if you remember. So as we explore the top 5 reasons that changing habits feels hard, I'm going to share a solution, a play to help you see why these strategies work and feel confident putting them into action. So while I can't cover all the plays that there are, all the strategies, I'm just going to highlight a few, because remember, we're trying to leave here with your next step. We don't need to know all the steps. And if you want to dive deeper, then you absolutely know how to keep in touch. Okay, so reason 1 that we don't reach our goals is that the goal is never set. Some people come to me uneasy because they don't like the word goals, and it's often because they may have set them in the past, and when they didn't reach them, they use them as a reason to doubt themselves. But here's the truth. We need goals. Goals give us direction, something to work towards. Smaller habit goals help us track progress and celebrate wins, which is such a key to boosting self-efficacy. And achieving goals provides us a sense of accomplishment, a major contributor to happiness, according to research out of Harvard. Feeling that progress, feeling that satisfaction when we reach a goal is a third of happiness. It's wild how simple it can be, but often overlooked. And here's the most important thing. A lot of times it's not even about the goal itself. It's about who we become in the process and really those unexpected bonus benefits that come up. So the play from the strategy playbook I want to highlight. So if you feel like you haven't set a goal, this one may be your next step. Ask yourself, have I set my goal, my big picture one, and maybe my smaller habit goal to get there? And here is the question to ask yourself, have I written it down? Research shows that writing down goals improves their chance of success by almost 50%. Bonus points if you share them with someone else. So it is a play called From Mind to Matter. We have got to get in the habit of taking action, which in this case is actually writing it down. All right, reason number 2 is that it's forgotten. You forgot about the goal. The brain is a processor. It's not a storage container. Yet most of us, we expect ourselves to remember far more than we really can. So before working with me, many people, they do what I call quit on accident. They just forget. And while I fully support if we have a goal that we want to quit on purpose, if it doesn't serve you anymore, let's avoid quitting just because we forgot to remember and we forgot that that was the most important thing. So the solution is a system, a plan to keep the most important thing, the most important thing. And the play that I want to highlight for that is ask yourself, how can I not forget that this is something I want? How can I keep it top of mind? What reminders can I use? Visual, technology-based cues to not let I forgot be the reason you fell off to the goal. We can get super creative in my group with this one because once you know it's a common habit hurdle, you're more likely to figure out how to jump it. So involve other people and really try to problem solve how not to let this reason be the one. Reason 3 that this is going to get all of us from time to time. It still gets me. It's too big. Having that big picture wellness goal, it's an important part of motivation when we are getting started, absolutely. But we have got to have small, achievable, realistic goals right in front of us as our next step. We need them right-sized and we need them in our control. So the play that we use constantly is called Trust in the Tiny. Ask yourself, is my goal tiny enough? Is it within my control? When I share research, I call it news you can use. I share what made news in healthier habits and then how you can actually put it to use, back to that action. Here is a piece of news you can use to back up this trust in the tiny. There are 2 groups of people that they hooked up to sensors measuring motivation markers. Group 1 were asked to focus on that big picture goal. So think of that big wellness goal that we talked about. Group 2 was asked to focus just on the first step of their goal. The result, group 1 showed no changes to any of the markers that measured motivation. Group 2, when they were thinking about just that tiny first step, they had increased motivation reflected in a couple markers, including their systolic blood pressure and other markers tied to action. This is proof we can trust in the tiny even when our brain tries to tell you it's not enough. All right, reason 4, it's set by somebody else. We're in the home stretch, so stick with me. Have you heard a reason that has gotten you so far before this? Keep that in mind. It could be your next step. And again, back to reason 4. BJ Fogg, who wrote Tiny Habits, I mentioned him a minute ago. He says there are 2 habit absolutes. So 2 things that we have got to keep in mind when we're making habits. One is it has to be something you want to do. Not your doctor, not your sister, not your spouse. You have got to want to do it. So ask yourself, is it something I want? Did I set this goal? As a coach, I try to teach the why behind these habits, what's going on in our bodies, because when you really understand what they can do for you, the likelihood of really wanting them goes up. And so a fun play, a strategy from the playbook is called More Me. And this is the self part of the secret sauce. It reminds us when we're setting or pursuing a goal, always ask, how can I make this more me? Tap into your uniqueness because the way you build and break habits should be personalized to fit you. And the last reason, it's related to habit absolute number 2 from BJ Fogg. He says habits have to feel good along the way, which brings us to this final reason. Health is not a destination. It truly is a journey. If we don't enjoy the ride, then what is the point? We have got to start enjoying the ride. I wish that we could do all the healthy things at once, eat all the kale, exercise once for a year, and then be done. But that's not how it works. The same goes for habits. We have to build them in a way that feels good so that it's for good. This is so key. How we become healthy is how we're going to stay healthy. So let's go back to the playbook. I'm going to quickly share 3 plays, 3 strategies that have the most research behind them and the ones that are most often missing. So again, we can come back to this recording to really dig into it, but be on the lookout for the one that may be screaming for your attention. So the 3 research-backed strategies that really lead to this on-again, off-again cycle that most all of us have experienced. The first problem is that we only address the outer layer of the habit. So that's what you're doing or not doing. It's like mopping up the floor from a leaky faucet instead of actually fixing it at the source. So the play that we use is going to the root. We have got to learn how to recognize and address those inner layers of habits, those habitual thoughts and feelings that are such a big part of what we do or don't do. So we talked about the definition of habits is the usual way of behaving, but really it's a usual way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. So a way to make habits feel good is to go to the root of the habit and start to become aware of those. And remember, this was also one of those habits that led to more self-efficacy. Pop that. So for my visual learners, let's talk about it's as if there's 3 layers to a habit. Our thoughts and feelings drive our actions. They really do matter. So when I work with clients, we start by planting a belief seed, a thought that we want to practice, fertilize, nurture, and grow into a belief or a habitual thought. When I was first diagnosed, my habitual thought was, I will never be healthy now, again, with this chronic progressive neurodegenerative disease. That had me feeling fearful and anxious, and it led to inaction. And ultimately, I was proving that true, that I was unhealthy. So the first seed I planted was, it's possible I could still be healthy in lots of other ways. That made me feel curious, and that curiosity led me to actions that really started me down this path of habits. So we can become healthier because we have the thought to do so, emotionally, mentally, metabolically, and in many different ways. And I always throw this in there. Ancient philosophers and modern scientists agree what we think we become. Very powerful. So problem number 2 of this, what keeps most of us stuck is, can anyone relate to this image? When it comes to all the info out there in health and wellness, infobesity, AKA information overload. It's a difficulty in understanding an issue and making decisions when there's just too much information. And greater than 70% of us have been exposed to misinformation related to health. That was a statistic from the Surgeon General. So what the research says is that we don't have a common operating system. There's all this information flying at us, but what do we do with it? And so the play from the playbook is to follow a framework. Again, it doesn't have to be the Habit Hub for autoimmune health, but it needs to be one that is simple. It needs to be one that you can make sense of for yourself. Backed by science is always a nice bonus, holistic, balanced, and focused on the areas that we can actually control. And note that Mindset Matters is a spoke of this Habit Hub, because remember that paying attention to our thoughts and feelings, that was one of the habits that boost self-efficacy. And really, I had to create this framework because it didn't exist. And so for a while, I was learning about the foods that could help. And so I became so hyper-focused on food that my connection suffered. And then I wanted to keep moving, and I was waking up early to ensure I got my movement in, but sleep suffered. And so I like to say that you cannot outnourish a crappy mindset. So making sure that a mindset is in that picture is huge. And so it helps to be able to find something that, again, can help you see how it all fits together. A lot of people ask, well, there's so much I can do, and how do I make sense of it? And we really just focus on one thing at a time. Again, back to that trust in the tiny. And the framework is so important because a goal without a plan really is just a wish. And the last reason is, how many people have said this? I know what I need to do. I know what I need to do. I just need to do it. So this is the third play I want to highlight to overcome this reason that making habits doesn't feel good. A problem for most of us is, again, just not doing what we know we want to do. Too much learning and not enough action. So again, back to our handy formula, learning plus action equals change. It's why we talked about this at the very beginning. Learning can feel so good, but if we stop there, the knowledge stays in our brain, and we need to turn knowing something logically into knowing it in our body. So for that, I call it the 20-80 rule. It's a flip on the 80-20 rule. But for every 20% time we spend learning new info, let's get out in the world and apply it 4 times the amount. So today's webinar, I'm giving you so much information. I know that I am contributing to the information, but we know we can come back to it. But I really, again, we want to be able to take this and take action. I have a quick story about one of my clients, Grace, who was reading a book by Mel Robbins. A lot of people know this book. It's called The High Five Habit, where you high five yourself in the mirror every morning. And there's all this science behind how it can help. And she's like, oh, this book is so good. You know, she was knowing it in her brain. It made so much sense. And at the end, I said, well, how was it? Do you notice a difference? And she said, not really. And I said, well, are you high-fiving yourself? And she said, no. And it sounds silly, but so many of us do that. We learn it, but we don't always actually then put it into action. And we talked about the secret sauce. And I think some of you noticed that I only stopped at 4, but I saved 5 for the last. It's the last one is support. And the play that does that uses that, is our support squad. Remember, it's a habit that if you build, has proven to help build self-efficacy. So not a single one of us is going to reach our wellness goal alone this year or ever. We have our physicians, we have our nurse practitioners, we have our physical therapists, maybe we have therapists. And what kind of coach would I be if I did not take a minute to highlight the power of a coach can have on your support squad? I had a ton of knowledge, and it wasn't until I experienced as a coachee getting a coach on my squad that I really began to piece this together and gain some awareness and have that accountability for action to really enjoy the process. Now, here is what the science is showing about coaching: decreased cost, improved outcomes, so much so that insurances, if your coach is credentialed, can actually use some HSA and FSA funds. They boost self-efficacy, set you up for these reasons goals fail to help overcome them, and maybe hopefully save you some frustration and enjoy the journey more. Plus, there's this cool phenomenon called the Pygmalion effect, where someone else's belief in your ability to do something can change your results. It's wild. They do studies in teachers and students. And so when I'm a coach for someone, my belief in them actually can change their outcomes. It's so wild, and it's just such a cool piece of neuroscience that we know. And the other really cool thing is that the American Medical Association actually issued a statement on the importance that health coaching has and this growing field. The National MS Society actually asked me to participate in their first ever Ask the Expert series on health and wellness coaching, which is amazing. And these are things that are starting to build trust in coaching. We are even in our second pilot we're measuring the impact of health and wellness coaching for people living with MS. And in medicine, just a fun fact, the time it takes from a study being published until it proves that it works and becomes the standard of care in guidelines is 17 years. So a medication is studied, we know it works, but it takes 17 years on average to make it to the guidelines. So coaching, the evidence is there, and I'm hoping that we can cut down on this 17-year wait so that more of us can take advantage of it, and that it's not something that, oh, I failed, so I need to get a coach. It is, something that we gift, that we get to do. So we're back to our fish. Our time together is coming to a close. I'm inviting you to be an autoimmune health creator with me, an orange fish, all of us here at Can Do MS, to turn our attention to all those things that we can do, your wellness goals and your habits that can get you closer. And I'm looking at the time. So I'm going to ABC, I want to say, always be celebrating. You're probably not surprised. It's a strategy that we talked about and one that helps with self-efficacy. So celebrate yourself in some way. When you hang up today, do something for yourself to celebrate that you came to learn about this. And we were going to end with the do of the day. I like to end podcast episodes and sessions and talks like this. Commit to one thing you can do today to make progress towards your goal, just one. And I would love that for us to see a boost in our self-efficacy and also clarity on your next step. So let's see how we did. Let's do a quick poll to see how we did. We always like to follow up. All right. Did we have any boost in our confidence that we are going to be able to take that next step? Did we learn one thing today that has you feeling that inner voice of, I can do this? All right. I'd love if you put your response in the poll so we can see it. Oh, I love it. Someone's ready for tomorrow. I love it. All right. Higher. All right. A little higher. I like it. All right. Our job is done. We just need tiny boosts in self-efficacy can go a really long way. So I know that we have a few minutes for some questions.
I was just gonna say, yes, we do have a little bit of time for questions, and I know we got a few in advance. So Amy, if you wanted to dive into those, and then I have a couple live as well if we still have time.
Sure, sure. Well, the common theme on the ones in advance were motivation. And so I want to just talk my take on motivation. So there is an old Latin proverb and it says, if there's no wind, we have to row. And I always think that motivation it's nice to have. It can feel like wind at our back. But if there's no wind, because time happens when there isn't wind and when we don't have motivation, we need to be able to have an actual process, step, and skill to still be able to keep going. And so, really thinking of it, this ties into all of what we've been talking about, thinking about it in terms of our head, our heart, and our hands. And so, the first thing is in our head, our belief, self efficacy. How do we build our belief that it's possible? If we believe it, how do we use our heart to deepen our desire for it? So how do we tap into our why? And our hands, the third one is our commitment to it. So do we have a plan? Have we committed? And so when motivation feels low, like let's take it and enjoy it when it's there. But when it's not there, we're going to row together. We are going to, I call it showing the work behind it, showing that it doesn't always feel easy, but working on our belief, working on our desire for it. And then when it comes down to it, that action, using our hands to actually move forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. Your presentation has just been lovely tonight. We have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to ask a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
One, many of us are procrastinators. If you're a procrastinator, any tips, recommendations for starting to build those goals into habits?
Absolutely. Because we have such short on time, if you find the podcast, I saw you shared it, there is an episode called Eat That Frog. And Eat That Frog, it comes from an old Mark Twain quote, and it is about this very idea of how to overcome when you feel like you have a frog you need to eat, which is what procrastinating can feel like, and the like tips and strategies to actually do it. But for the most part, it's recognizing that setting a plan and following through on it is one of the most crucial skills that we build as we're building habits, knowing that the us that has to follow through on that plan tomorrow or the next day, knowing that she or he or they is probably not going to feel like it, but learning that skill of trust to, again, go under what are we thinking and feeling that has us feeling like we are procrastinating. And so, again, there is a skill, and I encourage that episode because I want to talk about it for 30 minutes.
I love that analogy. Everyone check out that podcast episode. I wanted to confirm what the 5 S's are as well. I think we may have missed the support slide in there at one point.
I know. Well, I did it I was being tricky, but I saved it. But yes, it's science, self, strategies, simplicity, and support. And so really asking yourself which, if is there one that maybe feels like, ooh, maybe I should lean in on this one. Again, that's the takeaway. Trust in the tiny. What is my one next habit? What is my first next step? What is one thing? Because fatigue was another question that we got. And sometimes that overwhelm that our brain tries to offer us, it drains our energy. It really does. And so if we set one tiny goal and reach it, it doesn't matter how small it is. That feeling of pride and accomplishment and success, that is one of the most energizing feelings. And so next month, you're going to hear all about fatigue in a cool way, but I love to think of fatigue in how our emotions are playing into it. And so again, reaching a teeny tiny goal and feeling that proud accomplishment can be one of the most energizing feelings. So give it a try. Yeah, and say hello. If via email, say hello, and I can direct you to resources that may be just what you're looking for. So yeah, I'm so just grateful for everybody who's here. Thank you.
And you can stay in touch with Can Do a number of ways as well. I also want to take a moment to again thank our generous sponsor for making tonight's program possible. Thank you to EMD Serrano. As we've mentioned a couple times, next month we're going to be focusing on the topic of fatigue, and I'm really excited about this webinar. So definitely take a chance to join us February 5th. Thank you to Amy for being here tonight. Thank you so much for talking to us about habits. Thank you all, and I hope this was a great way to kick off 2025.